Hey guys, and welcome to the first video in this series where I'm going to be explaining how core fundamental programming concepts work without the use of any screen sharing or without the use of any code. And the rationale for this is that when I was teaching back in university, this is the way we used to teach the first year students, mainly those who'd never done any Python before, just to explain how something like a function, a generator, a while loop, a for loop, to explain how these fundamental concepts work, explain what they're for, what they do, without introducing any code. I felt like this was a much easier and simpler way of doing it, so when it came to actually writing the loop or writing the function, the students actually had a better idea of what they were writing because they already knew the bigger picture. So this video is going to be doing just that, and today we're going to be looking at for loops. Now, for loops are really common in programming. You're going to see them all over the place. And in Python, we tend to use the for something in this sequence, do this syntax. So if you're seeing it for the first time, it can look a little bit alien, but let's dial it all the way back and think about this from a simple everyday point of view. So imagine you've got a notebook, and suppose in this notebook you've got 5 items that you want to maybe go through, and these are things that you want to purchase in a store. So it could be some kind of shopping list or to-do list. So you might say in your head something like, for each item in my shopping list, first of all, check if I can afford it, and if so, go ahead and buy it. That is effectively all a for loop is. It's a way of going over something, in this case a shopping list, and simply saying, okay, whilst I'm on item number 1, here's a check. The check in this case is just, can I afford it? If yes, go ahead and buy it. So that might be something like an if statement in Python. And all we're doing is just repeating it. If we didn't do this using a loop, it'd be something like, if item 1 is in our budget, if item 2 is in our budget, if item 3, you'd end up writing tons and tons of lines. With the use of a for loop, we can just write the action once. Can I afford item X? The for loop is simply saying, for each X in my shopping list, just repeat that action. It's a way of us kind of condensing like a ton of lines into one. So in general, we use this if we want to repeat something, maybe over a list of names, over a list of web addresses, maybe a list of emails to send. If we want to repeat some action a given number of times, or if we want to process data that's inside of a list, a for loop does just that really. It's just a way of repeating yourself over some list or some sequence. For a different example, suppose you were having a party and you had a list of 10 friends you needed to call. You might have a list, maybe in a book, containing your 10 numbers. It's a bit old school, I know, but let's suppose we're living back in the 1980s. Imagine you've got a list of those 10 people. You might say something like, for each person in my list, call them, check if they can come. If they can, I'll write their name down somewhere else, make sure that I've got that stored. Move on to the next person, rinse and repeat until the end of my list. So by the end of my loop, I've gone through all the phone numbers. I've now got a separate list of people who are definitely coming, who have RSVP'd. Now, 2 common words we see when dealing with for loops, not just for loops, you do see this in other places as well, but you do see them quite commonly in for loops. Other words, break and continue. And in Python, these are built-in keywords. You'll know because they change color as soon as you type them. Now, break and continue are 2 very important keywords that you're going to be seeing in your for loop. And upon first glance, it can look like they're doing the same job, but they're not. They're doing 2 sort of similar jobs, but yeah, key difference. Let's take a look at the break keyword first. Break's job is to basically say that if I'm hit, kill the for loop, get out of here, and let's move on to the next statement. Now let's suppose for this example, we've got a shopping list, and maybe you've come out without your card, without Apple Pay, and you've only got a couple of coins in your pocket. What you might do is you might go through your shopping list, your different items, and maybe for each item that you go through, you might say something like, if the current item in my shopping list is going to put me over my budget, break, let's stop it. Okay, so imagine, say for example, you've only got £5 in your pocket. Imagine you've spent £4.50, the next item is £1. You can't afford that one, so there's no point carrying on with the list. It's time to end our loop, move on, and then, leave the store or whatever. So break is just there to basically say, here's a way to exit the loop early. Maybe you don't want to go through all the items in your list. You might have some kind of check, or you might have some kind of clause in there to basically say, if this condition's hit, kill the loop, let's stop it there. If we take the other example, imagine you were calling through a list of phone numbers to try and find out who's going to come to your party. Imagine you had, say, a max capacity of 5 for whatever reason. You might have some kind of check to say, if the amount of people who've said yes is equal to or greater than 5, stop. Let's break this loop and get out of here. We can no longer invite any more people, so there's no point progressing through the loop and ringing anyone else. Let's stop the loop and end it there. Now with the continue keyword, it's not as severe. What's going to happen when you hit continue, it's not going to end the loop completely. It's simply going to pause the current iteration and move on to the next item. So what you might do in this case, imagine for example we had our shopping list. You might say something like, for each item in the shopping list, first of all, let's check if we can afford it. If we can, let's go ahead and buy it and put it in the bag or whatever. Suppose you couldn't afford it, what you might do, rather than just breaking altogether, if you did continue, that would basically stop considering that current item, jump onto the next item instead, and do the same checks. So this would be a better alternative to break because, say for example, you had 50p left in your budget, rather than just doing break and like leaving the store, there might be an item later on which is small enough to fit in that budget. So we want to stop checking for that current item. We'll go and check the next. Maybe you can't afford that. Okay, we'll do continue. So let's move on to the next item. And eventually, yeah, it might work. You might be able to afford the last item in your list. So break kills the list completely. Continue just stops the current iteration, moves on to the next, and keeps going. And that is the difference between the break and continue keyword. Well guys, I hope that was helpful. That is my take on for loops explained as simply as possible. If you've got any fun or interesting ways which you've used to help kind of understand the bigger picture of for loops, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you've got any particular themes or topics you want to see in Python explained in this same manner, feel free to also let me know. Have a great weekend guys, and I'll see you all in the next video.